Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here today to share this session and this plenary session that will be presented by Jori Ringman. Jori Ringman is someone that most of you know, but just to remember, Jori is the Director General of CEPI, the European Confederation of Paper Industries. Since 2019, but he joined CEPI a couple of years ago, in 2005, and he has been involved in many topics like sustainability, issues aiming to explore the circular bioeconomy. So he's someone that knows a lot of our industry and certainly is looking forward to the future of this industry that will be focused in our forest-based bioeconomy. He will be presenting today a talk focused on the Green Deal with forest bio-based materials. So, Jori, the floor is yours.
It's always a pleasure to be. For me, it's the first time in Coimbra, so that's also a new experience, but always great to be here. As it was said, the title of my talk is The Green Deal with Forest Bio-Based Materials. That's the title. And what I'm planning to talk about is first to explain briefly what the Green Deal is for those who may know it yet, and how our business ecosystem is quite uniquely fitting for the big goals of the European Green Deal. But then I explain with three of the many policy goals of the Green Deal, how there might be still also some challenges with that for us. Then I look at some indicators how our sector is moving towards the 2030, which is one of the milestone years for the European Green Deal, and then compare what the European politicians want from the Green Deal and what we can offer and how those might match. So is there a deal in the end? And maybe to finish with a more positive note, to look why we are the industry of the future. So let's start. What is the Green Deal? Some of you, or I hope all of you, have already seen or heard about this lady. Her name is Ursula von der Leyen, and she's the President of the European Commission. She took the office in December 2019, so for 4 years almost in the office. And the first thing she did was to announce the European Green Deal. And this is really the flagship of her office in the head of the European Commission. When she did the announcement of it, she said that it's the Europe's man on the moon moment. And what I understand with this phrase is that she tries to explain that what she's doing with the Green Deal is something that has never been done before and maybe has not been even considered to be possible before. So what is it that she wants to do, then you might ask? Well, she says that she wants to deeply transform the European economy. So what we wear, what we eat, how we move, how we live, what we consume, and of course, how all this is produced and distributed in the economy. There are in this picture 11 areas of policy that they are putting together in this Green Deal, but it consists of over 50 new pieces of legislation and many policies, strategies, and papers that are then fixing the EU direction for all the way until 2050. The big goal of hers is that by 2050, Europe should be the first carbon-neutral continent. And it's very difficult to be against her goals. I think it's actually very much aligned with the thinking of what we have in our industry. So we obviously will have some opportunities in this. But I don't think we have ever had a moment like this in the whole history of our industry, where we have so many opportunities and so many challenges at the same time. And for anybody working in the industry, being in a management position, this is maybe the most challenging thing, to try to avoid the challenges or solve the challenges whilst safeguarding that the opportunities are not lost. So why do I believe that we have so many opportunities in this? It's because we are very unique as a business ecosystem or industrial ecosystem. We operate in a symbiotic system in the Europe. Maybe it's slightly different in Portugal, where you have more plantation forest than elsewhere, but it's already highly advanced way of being resource efficient. Any trees that are harvested, nothing is wasted, and I think this is anyhow the same in Portugal as well. In the pulp and paper industry, we already operate 139 biorefineries across Europe. And this is further making use of the materials we get into our hands, so that nothing really is wasted. So we have already existing technologies that are very much aligned with the goals of Mrs. von der Leyen for the Green Deal. And all this, you could say that it's part of the circular bioeconomy. And there is indeed now global awakening amongst the policymakers to the idea that bioeconomy could be a new industrial revolution. But there are big differences in how bioeconomy is seen all across the world. In USA, in China, they see more the technology, bioresource, and digitalization working together and creating these opportunities of moving to something more sustainable in industrial production. In Europe, so far, it has been more linked to the securing the bioecology and then protecting the bioresource, not seeing so much the opportunities for production and industry. Then India is a growing big economy. They are also very much in the biotechnology, which is somehow still missing from the Europe. But CEPI has been running a campaign since the spring to advocate for better policies for the new Commission. You may know that in June next year there's the European elections, and after that there's the start of the new 5-year policy cycle for Europe. And we are running this big coalition called Circular Choices for Competitive European Bioeconomy. And we had 2 weeks ago a public event. And the European Commission took the opportunity to come to our event, and they announced that they do believe that the next Commission will have a high priority for circular bioeconomy. And to start with, they are preparing some building blocks for that. And we should expect next summer a communication from the European Commission on biotechnologies and biomanufacturing. So there are elements that are moving for something more positive for us. But if the big goal of the European Green Deal is to get to climate neutrality by 2050, then we are also there in a good position as a sector, because we have, of course, the forest sink that everybody knows, and so far it has been the big focus point of the European Commission to increase the forest sink. But what we have been saying is that you can have the forest sink and harvest of trees so that you can produce bio-based products that are actually contributing to climate change mitigation by avoiding emissions of fossil materials and fossil products. And we did the study in 2020 where we quantified for the first time the total contribution. And we were even surprised ourselves to see how big the contribution of our products is. So the forest sink and the long-term storage in wood-based products is equal to what is the contribution of the substitution effect of the products, replacing fossil materials and keeping the fossil emissions in the ground in the first place. That was equal to 20% of the EU total CO2 emissions. So the EU greenhouse gas emissions would be 20% higher if our sectors didn't exist. And we believe that this can be still scaled up, further increased, so that we could avoid 30% of the EU emissions by 2030 if the policies get it right and support us and allow us to do that. But then the big if is the policy. And like I said, there is over 50 legislative proposals in the Green Deal that are all quite relevant for our sector. But just looking at the three of them, the climate change via LULUCF, so land use and land use change and forestry regulation, the Renewable Energy Directive revision that was made already the third time, and biodiversity requirements in the EU legislation. It's clear that all of that is legally binding for our industries. They all have impact on the supply that probably is negative, reducing the wood mobility. And the cost impact is clearly negative for us. So we are not sure if we are able to do what I just showed you previously to increase our positive impact on climate mitigation by having these climate neutral materials on the market that is replacing fossils, keeping the fossils in the ground. And if I look more clearly or more into the biodiversity requirements only, and of course all this legislation, all these 50 plus legislation, they have cumulative impact on us. But looking in isolation to these biodiversity requirements, I took some slides from an institute called Tünen in Germany. And they did the study for the German government. So it was not funded by the industry, it was not biased by the industry. We only found out about it when it was already ready. So they looked at what the biodiversity requirements would mean for wood mobilization, wood availability in Europe. So they had three scenarios. One was the business as usual, so what would happen without any legislation. Then there was like a moderate scenario, and then the more extreme scenario that is more likely to be the realistic scenario. So in the moderate version, we would lose nearly 10% of the wood on the European market. And in the more realistic scenario, we will lose nearly half of it. And then this will be replaced by more harvesting in other parts or not replaced at all, meaning that there's still contribution or maybe increase for the fossil materials if we can't use wood. And then they looked at the consumption and supply. The end-use consumption might not change much, at least in areas that are important, and it only is less supply from Europe. They are a bit more optimistic about paper, I think because they are having very German perspective, think that it's mostly recycled. But of course we know that you can't eternally recycle paper, so you wouldn't have this positive end result in the longer term. And of course the rest of the Europe is not like Germany. So I'm a bit doubtful about the result for paper production in Europe staying the same if the wood mobilization is so much impacted. But most importantly, what we would do is we would kill exports and increase imports. And this can't be, of course, good for European economy, this can't be good for European society, this can't be good for biodiversity. We know this term carbon leakage, and what this would mean is biodiversity leakage to other parts of the world. So it's not going to be good. Well, then let's look a bit on how industry is moving towards 2030. Every year when the companies in our sector publish their annual reports or financial reports, we make some kind of analysis of how it is looking like in the companies. But now for the first time we did some experimenting with artificial intelligence and then asked AI how they read the annual reports. And it was actually quite interesting in the sense that it said some obvious things that is good to get confirmation for, even from AI, because you might read things with your own lenses and then see what you want to see and then not see what you didn't expect or didn't want to see. So they divided this in 4 regional categories. So outside of Europe, there's a lot of focus on packaging. Yeah, packaging is there. I'm moving too fast now for myself. In the Central Europe, there's focus on adaptation, and it's obvious because of the big crisis that was caused by the Ukrainian war. So they were highly impacted on the energy and even raw materials. In the Nordics, there's clearly a tone of defensive, explaining how we are actually sustainable, and it might not be understood by the policymakers, so they seem to be quite defensive in their reporting. But what was interesting, I wonder what I did now. I don't have an academic doctoral degree, so I should be able to run PowerPoint presentations. So what was interesting about the south of Europe is that there, for the first time, at least for us to notice, there was focus on bioeconomy. And that was positive, because for a long time when CEPI started talking about bioeconomy back in the financial crisis, actually, in 2008, it was our way of reintroducing our sector to the policymakers in the middle of the financial crisis, saying that we are not the sunset sector, we have great hopes for the future as bioeconomy. Then we got some pushback from our colleagues in south of Europe saying that, but that's only for the Nordics. And it's not. Even recycling mills can be part of the bioeconomy and circular bioeconomy. So now it's great to see that companies in the south are talking about bioeconomy and clearly owning the concept. And I see that this conference is, of course, doing the same. But it's circular bioeconomy, and what I like to remind people is that our sector has been circular even before the circular economy term was coined. The first version was, of course, the beginning of the paper industry in the Iberian Peninsula 950 years ago, when paper industry was introduced to Europe. It was circular. It was making paper from old clothes, rags. Then cellulose came into the picture as wood-based cellulose material. And then in the 1990s, there was a new focus by the industry to recycling. So we realized that even if we have this, what then felt like an abundant material in wood, we still have to be clever and recycle it. And in 2000, we made the first industrial commitment to say that we want to increase recycling in our sector. And then it was only like 15 years later that the EU discovered the circular economy. And now I think we are starting to move to circular economy 3.0 in our sector. So the EU is still in the 1.0 in their version, but we are in 3.0, I would say. And this is where we see that there's more diversification of the output and input of the materials. So biorefineries and multiple input materials. Circular economy and bioeconomy are very much complementary. What we have, of course, in the circular economy is to make sure that the bioresources that we use are used in the most resource-efficient way. But it works also the other way around. Circular economy alone can't work, because you can't collect from yesterday's consumption enough for tomorrow's needs. You have always losses in everything that is human, the consumer, the waste management, the sorting, the industrial processing of the materials. There's always losses in all that. And also, if we want to have still an economy that is growing, even if a little bit, what we had yesterday can't be enough for tomorrow. And if we want to be export sector, then you still need to have opportunities in exporting. And that's not available for recycling here in Europe, because it's somewhere else where we export it to. So I would say that this is the great potential for bio-replenishment of the circular economy. So whatever material it is, metals, glass, plastics, you could still recycle as much as you can of those materials. But the extra that you can't have enough for tomorrow's needs, should come from bioresources, I would say. And that's the great opportunity for us. We did the study in CEPI also 2 years ago, looking at what could be the concept of a pulp and paper mill 2030. We looked at what are the technologies, what are the input materials, what are the output, and what are the requirements that we get from our stakeholders. And we identified 169 novel technologies that could be used, that are already available in the market. So you could pick the phone and say that I want this gadget for my mill, but are not commonly used in our sector yet. And we believe that those could be like a menu for our companies to look into and say that, well, this could work for us, or that could work for us, or the combination of these could be the solution that we have been looking for. And with that, we made this concept that is not a blueprint for a real mill, of course. That's up to you to look into those opportunities and see what could work for your individual mill. But as a conceptual level, we believe that we could still advance in material sustainable availability and circularity, so that we would continue using, of course, sustainable wood. We would continue using recycled paper or recycled fibers. But we could maybe, in many cases, start taking in textiles for recycling and agricultural residues, so alternative fibers that are cellulosic but not from wood. And in circularity, we would continue, of course, being the circularity champions that we are already, not only in paper recycling, but in any area. In water, we are real circularity champions in our sector. In chemicals, in energy, in any raw materials that we take in, and even, of course, increasingly, we are looking into being also circularity in CO2. And then digitalization, of course, we are advancing in that. And then the outputs would be biochemicals, bioenergy, biomedicals, bio-based materials, bioproducts. And there are a lot of new business opportunities for companies to create value added. So, what's the deal? Is there a deal? There's this old saying that many companies like to use, saying that anything can be made of wood that is now made from fossil materials, we can also make it from wood. So anything can be made from wood, but not everything can be made from wood. So luckily, with circular economy, a lot of the material input can come from the fossil materials that were already extracted, can still be kept in business. So we could look into maybe 3 questions to identify where we should focus with our biomaterials, because not everything can be made, because we simply don't have enough resources for that, for the whole of the economy. So one could be where the land use makes sense. So we are not competing for food production, for example, in using wood, and we could see where that makes the best contribution to the society, where it has the best environmental or other kind of good for the sustainability, and where it's really making the difference for transition for the whole of the society. EU has already also listed some requirements that they would like to see happening in the bioeconomy. But to start with, the problem for EU is that about 75% of the EU economy is based on imported input, either already ready-made products from China or elsewhere, or raw materials or energy coming to Europe. But our sector, of course, is very much made in Europe. We are sourced from European wood mostly, with European technology, producing it in Europe and recycling it in Europe. So this is unlike any other area in Europe. Then EU is facing, but would like to avoid, supply chain disturbances and geopolitical risks of sourcing. But we know that since we are made in Europe, we are not depending on global supply. We are open to trade. We want to trade, both import and export. But if there's a crisis situation, we are not stopping our production because we can work with our own resources. So we can improve the strategic open autonomy of Europe. And they would like to, of course, put an end to the fossil economy, and we are part of the circular bioeconomy, so we have the solution for that. They would like to exclude food and feed crops for bio-based chemicals and plastics. Well, we have a solution for that too, because we mainly work with wood or then agricultural residues. And we can even say that we can provide something for the food and pharmaceutical industries as input, and we already do. They would like to see biorefineries that are not so much fuel focused. And of course, like we said, anything can be made from wood, so we can also tick that box. And EU says that they would like to be carbon neutral by 2050, but our sector, many of our actors can say that they are already carbon neutral and can supply these carbon-friendly products. The next economy is shifting towards organic materials, and as I just told you, the EU then announced 2 weeks ago that this will be the new focus area thanks to our very persistent lobbying in the EU in Brussels. In the EU biorefinery outlook, they said that there will be high-value bio-based products, including these that are listed on the screen, and the goal is to have 300 new sustainable biorefineries by 2030. I don't know if that will happen because it's a short time for that, but it's a great idea. But they also looked at where this growth could come from, and what is interesting is that 2/3 of that growth that the Commission is projecting is from those pathways that are linked to our industry. So either using the lignin or then even going more advanced and producing some sugars and lignin-based materials. So we clearly are having the keys for the future. Like I said, I believe that we are the industry of the future, and it's because we have very strong foundations for it. We are standing on renewable legs already, and that's great. We are not intrinsically fossil. That is a much bigger challenge for any other industries to change. The EU forest stock is growing, and we are mostly sourcing from Europe. And like I said, we are also circular. We are multiple circularity champions, so any resource that we get to our mills and our factories, we use very carefully and very well. And we are pioneers in automation in our sector, and now increasingly getting advanced also in digital. Maybe we started later in digitalization, but I think we are advancing now quite fast. And we have decades of energy efficiency work already in our experience, and then we can advance in that. And of course, the more energy efficient we are in pulp mills, for example, the more materials we have for producing value added with the residues that we don't need to burn. And it's possible technically for us to switch fuels, so we wouldn't basically need biomass at all if there would be availability of other alternative clean energy, affordable prices, of course. And the technology solutions are available, and we know where to look further. What could be still the stopping point for our show is that there's a lot of subsidies and strong political support still for fossil economy in the big countries in Europe. And this economic and geopolitical uncertainty that we have, of course, it's very toxic for any investments that we would want to do in Europe. But nevertheless, I believe that we are the industry of the future. 3 reasons to believe so. So it's justified hope. It's not just hope for being positive or optimistic, but it's justified hope, I say. Because the long-term sustainability trend is on our side. And because this legislation, even if it's not perfect, even if it's sometimes feeling very punitive for us, it's making this change that is necessary. And because our sector is already moving and has invested and is investing for for the greener transition and green future. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
For this inspiring presentation. I guess that there are a lot of questions from the audience. Can you raise your hands, please?
Good morning. Good morning.
Can you present yourself, please?
Yes. So good morning, Gabriel Souza from Alter Group. Thanks for a very nice presentation. You showed here a lot of opportunities and changes that can happen in our industry, and you did mention that the pulp and paper ecosystem is the right ecosystem to develop all these opportunities. But as we know, and when it comes to biorefineries specifically, there's a lot of new technologies and new products, as you also mentioned. But taking the pulp and paper ecosystem, you also understand, and we understand that in order to do that shift, there's a lot of investment that needs to happen. And of course, pulp and paper is a capital-intensive industry. But of course, making that shift, also we need to think about the financing of that. So understanding that the pulp and paper is conservative industry in moving and making that shift, do you believe that there will be tools to implement the financing part of the deal? Or you also think that even from the investor perspective, you need to have a shift on the type of investors that typically invest on the pulp and paper industry? Because again, some of these biorefinery opportunities are just totally different businesses altogether. So your view on that?
Of course, the investments is an area that is very much in the core of the business, and I discussed that in CEPI because it's so much in the business. I guess it's again the two microphones. Is this better? Okay. So it's so much into the individual company's core business to talk about finance that we do that in CEPI. But what we are doing is, of course, securing funding from EU for research and innovation. Last year we had a record year of, if I remember correctly from the top of my head, nearly 300 million euros for our sector in research and development. But then there are lots of instruments for de-risking and investing in the first-of-the-kind projects that you can have from EU, for example, from European Investment Bank. They can also help with concrete terms in building a business case when you move to an areas that you don't know from your own business because it's a new product, new business. But it's still going to be challenged, and that's understandable. What I have understood is that the good thing about the kind of technology we have in biorefineries is that it's rather scalable, so you can start small. And often these new opportunities are much smaller volumes than what we know from pulp and paper. So it's on the side of your pulp and paper production, maybe something that is still manageable for a mature industry like ours. But I do understand that it's a challenge, and in particular to make the investment decision now when there's so much uncertainty, geopolitically, politically, regulation challenges, that nobody really knows what kind of investments would be safe for the future, because the regulation is also changing in Europe so fast.
Paul Barata from Navigator. Thank you very much for your presentation. In one slide you show the, let's say, different view from other global players like China, India and US. And probably they will move with different speeds in the different stage as Europe. How do you see this Green Deal in what concerns the economic competition with those players? It will be, at least in the short term, an advantage or more a challenge for us, for the European Union industry? Thanks.
I think it's a challenge in the term. So I sometimes told myself that what the lion wants to have by 2050 is almost like this kind of biblical image of the lamb and the lion on the meadow together. And then we all love that kind of beautiful green image. But how to get there, and do we survive the next 10 years in the transition? That's the big challenge. And then I don't know if anybody has an answer to that. Another way of looking at it is that maybe the Green Deal, despite these noble goals, is more like a disruption that was needed to shake the system. And maybe it's the next commission that is then building something, so giving the real concrete elements for building the future. I don't think that there's a lot of building blocks in this. It's more like the disruption and saying what is not good.
João Martins from Altry. Recently, we have been looking to legislation regarding forest management, land use, etc., carbon market. How do you think, is for you that a risk for our sector? Because what we have seen so far is that there is a lot of uncertainty of how this legislation will be implemented really. Do you look at it as a risk for us or as an opportunity? Because it's not clear for anybody in the room, I think, how it will be implemented in the real world. That's my question.
Well, I would say that so far what we got from the Commission regarding forest has been more a risk and a limiting factor for us. And I don't see many opportunities there yet. There's, by the way, a group of member states of the EU that are now starting finally to wake up and they are forming a coalition. I don't believe that Portugal is part of that, so they should join it. It's called Wood Pop. So Wood Policy Platform, Wood Pop. It's an Austrian initiative and they are finally starting to think together what should be better for forest. But then, for example, in the circular carbon, I think we have opportunities there, because we are very much based on carbon recycling, the green or the renewable carbon. But there, I think the risk for us is that the fossil sector is not going to accept that we get this kind of benefit. So they are working already very hard to confuse policymakers and say that if you recycle fossil carbon, then it's renewable. And we believe that at least in the start, there should be clearly different scheme for renewable carbon projects and fossil carbon projects. Recycling fossil carbon is sustainable, that's great. If you already have released the CO2 from fossil sources and you can recycle back, that's good, instead of always taking new carbon from the ground. But renewable carbon can even achieve negative emissions, and that's the difference, and that we want to build on and maybe have a business opportunity for our sector.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe, oh, Luis. They are running my life very easy here. Thank you.
Hi, Jori, very welcome to Portugal once again. Very nice to see you again. Clearly from your presentation, I think we are on the right side of the moon, on the bright side. Policies and politicals are a bit aligned with us and with our goals. But how can we have a forest of opportunities on the side of the products, but we are entering our new markets or markets that are already grown up with the fossil solutions. And how can these policies influence markets to develop these investment opportunities and business opportunities? Maybe it's easier in Europe, how it will be outside Europe. How can we really push this intention of political to real economy and real commercial and business opportunities?
it's a very important question, of course, but not easy to answer. But maybe the easy answer is that we could look what's happening in the US. So the Biden administration announced a year ago in September a new initiative for bioeconomy. And they want to build bioeconomy in a very short time frame by 2030 so that it would be then already 1/3 of the global economy. That sounds to me impossible, but actually the US has already proven track record in landing on the moon, so maybe we should trust the Americans more than the Europeans in that. So they really see business opportunities, and I think what is the key for their success is that Biden took all of the administration, all the areas of the government together, and then set clear tasks, clear deadlines for all parts of the administration to say that you do that by then, you do this by then, and then all together that will make sure that we actually have achieved this target of being, I think that 30 trillion euros by 2030 would be their bioeconomy. And they start from much behind of Europe and try to get to be the leading power in this by then. And I hope that Europe can compete, but can also collaborate where it makes sense. So if we are needing to develop new technologies, for example, then maybe we should join forces with the Americans. That would be maybe one opportunity as well.
Thank you, Jori. I would like to have to share with you several questions, but my friends of the organizing committee are telling me to close the session. So it was a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for your inspiring contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.